Welcome to the world of biology through Jaguar classes. And today we are taking the next part of this chapter 7, control and coordination. And in this part 3rd, we will cover the following topics. And the topics that we will cover in today's class: structure and function of different parts of human brain, and chemical control and coordination in humans by endocrine system, feedback mechanism for the regulation of hormonal system or hormonal function in our body, and control and coordination in plants by different plant hormones. After today's class, the learning outcomes that we are expecting, and in which knowledge based skills that you will learn after today's session or after today's class, you will be able to understand that the control and coordination are the outcomes, and these are the hormones that are responsible as with the nervous system, and they are help controlling and coordinating all the activities in our body. You will also be able to know the responses of nervous system as reflex action, voluntary action and involuntary action. In skill based learning outcomes, you will be able to develop functional understanding, or you will be able to understand functionally the chemical coordination is found in both plants and animals, and you will be able to draw the structure of neuron, reflex arc and human brain after learning the facts related with these important parts of our nervous system. And competencies that will be developed after today's class are collaborative learning, critical thinking, and problem solving nature to understand the feedback mechanism regulates the action of hormones, in which you will collaborate all the learning points or learning facts of today's class. Now let's start with our class. Today's class with the third part of control and coordination, chapter 7. In this part, we will recall and recapitulate the earlier facts that we have discussed in earlier two parts, and we will sum up the other topics like hormonal control in humans and control and coordination in plants. In this slide, first of all, we will recall and recapitulate the earlier facts that we have discussed in earlier part, the structure of human brain, which is one of the important part of our nervous system, and nervous system is one of the system which helps in control and coordination. And in this you are seeing here the different parts of human brain, and the important parts of human brain. This is the part cerebrum, which is also known as forebrain, and the hypothalamus and thalamus. These are the parts of midbrain, and cerebellum, brain stem, and pons and medulla are the part of hindbrain region. Pituitary gland as well as hypothalamus and thalamus part involved in the chemical control and coordination also, and corpus callosum is one of the part of that, this midbrain portion. And now these are the ventricles, which are also present as different sections in our brain. Now come to know the brain and its different parts with its function. Now in this slide you will be able to understand the different lobes which are actually present in our forebrain. Our forebrain or cerebrum part is divided into these important lobular regions. This lobe is known as frontal lobe in front, side, and parietal lobe, the third lobe, that is known as occipital lobe, and this one is known as temporal lobe, just above our ear cavity. And this portion of the brain is cerebellum, and this is the brain stem which connects the brain with the spinal cord, and cerebellum is the part of hindbrain. You have to understand in this that 1, 2, 3 and 4 lobular parts which have the different receptions or reception centers to control different functions in our body. Now let's study these lobes or lobular parts of our forebrain with their functions. As we have seen here, this part, which is the frontal lobe of the cerebrum, is responsible for thought process, memory and behavior. And this portion, which is the parietal lobe, is basically responsible for the control of language and touch stimulus. Means in this region, the reception centers to control language, speech and touch region are present here, and that is the occipital lobe where visual processing function is going on, and reception center of control of visual processing is present here. And here this fourth lobe, which is parietal lobe, is responsible for the hearing, learning and emotions. And this portion, that is the hindbrain portion of our brain, which is responsible for the balance and coordination, that is cerebellum. And this region is pons region, which is responsible for the breathing, heart rate and temperature control. These are the lobes which are present in our forebrain. Now parts of the brain, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe and occipital lobe are the important parts or reception centers of our forebrain portion, and cerebellum is the hindbrain region, and that region is brain stem is that region which connects our brain to the spinal cord. Now come to the next slide. Again in this slide also you can see that how the different parts of the cerebrum region, which is the largest portion of our brain, have the different reception center. Now in this image you can see that here in this frontal part or the frontal lobe of the cerebrum, attention, planning and decision making areas or reception centers are present, which is responsible for these actions which are taken place by us. And this portion is responsible for the movement, means center of movement control is present here. Touch stimulus is received here to give the response of touch, and that taste stimulus is also received here in this region. Vision in this occipital lobe, hearing in this temporal lobe, smell, speech, these are present in that lobular structure. Memory, processing and emotions are also taking place in this hemisphere of the our brain. Heart rate, breathing, this is the region which is pons, and movement and coordination controlled in the cerebellum portion of that. And with the help of this image you can clearly see that how our different lobes in the cerebrum part of the brain are responsible for the control of different voluntary and involuntary actions. Medulla oblongata, which is one of the part of our hindbrain, that is responsible for the control of breathing and heart as well as respiratory movement or respiration process. That's why it is now it is also known as, it is associated with the respiratory center pons also, and responsible for these involuntary function control. And now these are the different lobes. Again you can revise here. temporal lobe for memory and understanding the language, occipital lobe responsible for the vision perception, and parietal lobe is responsible for the control of perception, making sense of the word. Arithmetic means arithmetic ability to solve the different numerical problems is present here, and spellings also we can control here, and this portion is used for all these functions taking place in our body. Sensory cortex or sensations are received here in the form of different stimuli, and then in that way the different senses are controlled. Motor cortex movement is responsible for the movement of our body, means all voluntary actions are controlled here, and frontal lobe, that is responsible for so many functions: executive functions, thinking, planning, organizing, and problem solving, emotions, and behavioral control and personality. That means this portion is having most of the reception centers to control our different tasks related with our intelligence. With that, you can able to understand the different functions of the brain. Now, once again, have a quick recap of these functions of forebrain. Forebrain, as you know, that known as cerebrum. In this function, the functions which are controlled in our body are, that is the thinking part of the brain, that means responsible for the thinking process. It controls our all voluntary actions and store information and responsible for the memory retention. It also receives sensory impulses from various body parts and integrates it. And hypothalamus, which is the midbrain region of our brain, its functions are, it's controlled sleep and wake cycle, and which is also known as circadian rhythm of the body, and it also controls the urge for eating and drinking. Thirst and hunger we are feeling here in that region. And functions of hindbrain, in which three important parts are coming: medulla oblongata, pons, and cerebellum. Medulla region of the hindbrain is responsible for involuntary function such as breathing, vomiting, sneezing, etc. And pons is also known as the respiratory center, and it is connected with the pneumotaxic center of the brain, and it helps in swallowing, bladder control, and facial expressions also. Cerebellum part of our hindbrain is responsible for the voluntary actions such as posture, balance, coordination, and in speech also. It is responsible for making our speech. Now, besides the central nervous system, in which brain, spinal cord, and nerves are coming, the one another system that we have already discussed in earlier uh, part of this chapter, one another important system is responsible for the control and coordination in our body, that is known as endocrine system. And the main part of that endocrine systems are our different endocrine glands. And what are these endocrine glands? Endocrine glands are ductless glands which secrete their chemicals called hormones, which are actually known as the chemical messengers of our body. And following is the table in which you can see and learn the different endocrine glands with their different secretions as well as their functions. Here are the important endocrine glands present in our body. With the help of this table, you can easily understand and see that what are their role. Thyroid gland. The function of this gland in our body, it produces the thyroxine hormone that regulates carbohydrate, protein, and fat metabolism in our body. And the second important gland is adrenal gland, which produces adrenaline hormone, and it is secreted at the time of fear, fight, or flight. That's why this hormone is also known as emergency hormone as well as fear, fight, or flight hormone. Pancreas, which produces insulin and glucagon, which regulates glucose metabolism in our body, and this gland is dual in nature, because you have studied in life processes in digestion, this gland is act as the exocrine gland also, and here it act as endocrine gland. That means pancreas is exocrine as well as endocrine gland and known as compound gland. Testis, which is also one of the endocrine gland present in males, it produces male hormone known as testosterone, required male secondary sexual characteristic features such as birth and moisture, and it controls all the secondary sexual characteristic feature in adolescent age or puberty age in males. And the pituitary gland, which is one of the important endocrine gland, which is known as the master gland because it masters all these glands by secreting different releasing hormones or stimulating hormones to control all other endocrine glands. It secretes growth hormone that regulates the growth and development of an organism also, and ovaries, which are the um, producing the sex hormones present in female body, and they produce the estrogen needed for the female sexual development. Now, besides that endocrine system, you should also understand about the feedback mechanism. And this, what is that feedback mechanism? That feedback mechanism is just like a switch on and switch off system to control the secretion of the hormones by the several endocrine glands in the endocrine system, which is responsible for regulation of chemical control and coordination. Now, try to understand this mechanism. That feedback mechanism is basically required to regulate the timing and precise release of the hormones, means at what time the hormone should be released to control a particular action or a particular function in our body, and at which time it has to be switch off, switch on and switch off of any endocrine glands to release a particular hormone as chemical messenger is guided by that feedback mechanism. For example, try to understand it with the help of an example. If the sugar level in blood rises, it is detected by the cells of pancreas, which respond by producing more insulin. And as the result, the blood sugar level falls, insulin secretion is reduced. In that way, that feedback mechanism is working to regulate our chemical control and coordination in our body by controlling our endocrine glands and their secretion. Now, we are coming to in this slide, we are talking about the next part of our chapter, that is coordination in plants. Is control and coordination is similar like in case of animals in plants also? Now, try to understand it. Unlike animals, plants do not have a nervous system. Means plants control and coordination is not depend upon the nervous system because they do not have any nervous system, and plants use some chemical means for control and coordination, and many plant hormones are responsible for the various kinds of movements in plants, and these plant hormones are known as phytohormones, and they are also known as growth regulators, and these are responsible for the different growth related movement as well as other movements in plants, and they also control the various physiological functions taking place in plants like photosynthesis, respiration, etc. Movements in plants can be divided into two main types: tropic movement and nestic movements, that we have already studied in our live classes. I have shown you the different presentation to make them understand what are the tropic movements and nestic movements. Now, try to understand once again, recall that tropic movement, the movement which are in particular direction in relation to the stimulus are called tropic movements, and this phenomenon is known as tropism. Tropic movement happens as a result of growth of a plant part in a particular direction. There are four types of tropic movements, and these are phototropism, means movement due to light or movement of a plant part towards the light stimulus is known as phototropism. And geotropism, that is the movement due to gravity or movement of plant part due to gravity towards the earth, is known as geotropism. And one more type of tropism is seen in the plants, that is known as hydrotropism, means movement of you have seen so many times when we are sprouting the seeds, their roots are always growing towards the water, source of water. And basically hydrotropism is related with the that only, means movement of plant part due to water towards the water stimulus. And chemotropism is also seen in the plant to control and coordination various events, like movement due to the some chemicals is coming under this chemotropism, which is seen in pollen tube formation at the time of pollen germination after pollination in the plants. The another type of movements which are not related with the growth in plant are known as nestic movements. For to understand the nestic movements, you can recall the example of the that touch me not plant. Nestic movements are non-directional movements to the stimuli, and in this example you are able to see the plant which is known as Mimosa pudica, and this is the scientific name of the plant, Mimosa pudica, and in common language it is known as touch me not plant. Its leaves fold up and droop when you will touch it. That's why its name is known as touch me not plant. And plant hormones are responsible for the different types of movements as well as growth related functions, growth related movements, all are controlled by the different plant hormones. And these plant hormones are also known as phytohormones. They are responsible for all aspects of growth and development in plants. And here is the five categories of these hormones. The first category is known as auxins, which are synthesized at shoot tips and root tips and helps in growth of roots and shoots in plants. The second category of plant hormone, gibberellin, which helps in germination, flowering and fruit ripening process in plants. And the third category of these hormones found in plant are cytokinins, which promotes the cell division, and abscisic acid, which is in short known as ABA. This is also one of the important plant hormone which causes wilting of leaves, and it is the only hormone which is growth inhibiting hormone, and it inhibits the growth movement or growth action in the plant, and that's why it is also known as stress hormone. And ethylene is one more hormone which is gaseous in nature, and it is gaseous hormone which is essential for ripening of fruits. This is about the plant hormone.